9 years ago, on an evening that started like any other, my world began to quietly unravel. It was raining. The kind of soft, misty rain that blurs the edges of streetlights and paints the pavement in silver. I remember because I stood outside our front door for a long time before I went in, fumbling with my keys while balancing a paper bag of takeout and the umbrella. I'd picked up Daniel's favorite, spicy shrimp noodles from the little place down the street he always said reminded him of our honeymoon in Thailand. Inside, the house was too quiet. Usually, Daniel would have music on, or at least the television murmuring in the background. But that night, there was only silence and the low hum of the refrigerator. I found him at the kitchen table. He didn't look up when I walked in. He was sitting stiffly, shoulders tense, his phone in one hand and a glass of untouched water beside him. The takeout bag crinkled in my arms as I set it down. "Hey," I said, trying to sound normal, even though the air felt off. "Rough day?" He looked up then, and my breath caught. His eyes were hard. Cold. Not confused or hurt. Just angry. "I know," he said quietly. I frowned. "Know what?" He turned the phone toward me. "You were cheating on me." There, on the screen, were messages. Familiar ones. Mine. Words exchanged with Mark, my college friend, cut out and lined up to tell a story that wasn't true. I saw a snippet of a message, "Can't wait to see you again, it's been too long." Another, "Glad I could help you pick something special for her." I remembered that day clearly. Mark had asked for help choosing a birthday present for his girlfriend. We'd met up at a bookstore cafe downtown. I'd even shown Daniel the earrings later that night when I came home. He barely glanced up from his laptop. My hands trembled. "Daniel, this is a misunderstanding." He stood up so fast the chair scraped against the tile. "Don't lie to me." "I'm not lying," I said, stepping toward him. "You can ask Mark." I don't want to talk about it," he snapped. "I don't want to hear excuses." "But you know me," I whispered. "You know me." His jaw clenched. "Apparently not." He reached behind him and pulled something from the counter. "Divorce papers." I stood frozen, my fingers curling at my sides, heart hammering in my chest. "Where did you even?" I started, voice cracking. "I had them drawn up last week," he said. "I've been watching you for a while. I was just waiting for proof." I laughed then, a bitter, stunned sound. "Proof? Screenshots taken out of context? That's all it took?" He slammed the papers onto the table. "You betrayed me." "No," I said, louder now. "I didn't. You didn't even ask me what happened. You just decided. Condemned me without a word." His voice was flat. "Sign them. Or I'll make this worse." I stared at the man I had once trusted with everything, the man who held my hand through my mother's funeral, who cried with me in the doctor's office when we learned we couldn't conceive naturally. That man wasn't standing here. Not anymore. He turned and walked out, leaving me alone in the kitchen. The walls seemed to tilt slightly, like the whole house was leaning under the weight of what just happened. I didn't sign the papers that night. I just sank to the floor, surrounded by uneaten food and the sound of rain against the windows, and cried until my throat was raw. I thought I could fix it. But I didn't know then, the truth doesn't matter when someone's already decided what they want to believe. The days that followed blurred into one long, suffocating silence. Daniel didn't come home that night. Or the next. His things slowly began to disappear, shirts missing from the closet, his toothbrush gone, his coat from the hallway hook. No note. No explanation. Just absence. I tried calling him. Once. Twice. Dozens of times. Each went straight to voicemail. I left messages, my voice cracking as I pleaded with him to just talk to me. To let me explain. To look me in the eyes and listen. But there was nothing. Not even a text. I didn't call Mark at first. I was too numb. Too disoriented. When I finally did, his voice was full of confusion and guilt. "I don't understand," Mark said. "Did Daniel actually think we?" "Yes," I said flatly. There was a long pause on the line. "But, you told him about Maya. I even met him once at that art fair. Why would he think?" "I don't know," I said, though a small voice in my head whispered, "because he was always afraid of being left." And he finally convinced himself it was happening. Mark offered to call Daniel, to explain, but I told him not to. If Daniel wanted the truth, he'd have asked for it. He didn't. The divorce papers stayed untouched on my kitchen table for nearly a week. Then one morning, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a courier holding a manila envelope. No words. Just a nod and a clipboard to sign. Inside, finalized copies of the divorce documents, now stamped and filed by his attorney. No goodbye. No confrontation. Just bureaucratic closure. I sat on the floor again, in the same spot as that first night, and reread the papers until the words blurred. Somewhere deep inside, I kept waiting to wake up. To find Daniel beside me, shaking his head and saying it was all a terrible mistake. That he knew me. That he trusted me. But he didn't. And that broke something I hadn't even realized was fragile. I moved out a month later. The apartment was small, one bedroom, creaky floors, drafty windows, but it was mine. The walls were bare. The fridge was often empty. My bed felt too big. Grief isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the quiet resignation of brushing your teeth in front of a mirror and not recognizing the woman looking back at you. I lost weight without trying. Friends stopped asking me out because I always said no. I didn't laugh for months, not really. But the worst part wasn't the loneliness. It was the shame. People whispered. Assumed. A few acquaintances unfollowed me online. One even messaged, "Sorry to hear what happened. I never took you for the type." What type? The type who gets left? The type who gets blamed? The type who's never allowed to tell their side of the story? Time passed, though I couldn't say how much. Days melted into weeks, weeks into gray months. I existed. I worked. I paid bills. I breathed. And slowly, so slowly, I started to piece myself back together. I learned how to grocery shop for one. I adopted a plant and didn't kill it. I went to therapy, though it took me 4 canceled appointments to finally walk through the door. My therapist, Grace, didn't ask me if I was okay. She asked me why I believed I deserved so little. That question haunted me for weeks. I didn't have an answer. Not then. But it planted something, a seed of anger, maybe. Or strength. Or both. I didn't reach out to Daniel again. Not once. Eventually, his name stopped appearing in my thoughts when I woke up. I stopped checking his social media. I stopped wondering if he regretted it. Because even if he did, it didn't matter anymore. I met Alex on a Tuesday. Not a Friday night in a bar. Not at a friend's wedding or a romantic bookstore meet-cute. A Tuesday, in the middle of a long, boring workday, at a community volunteer drive I had to attend for my job. He was organizing donation bins. I was half asleep behind a clipboard, running on black coffee and too little sleep. He asked me if I wanted a granola bar. It was the first thing he ever said to me. I remember looking at him, clean-shaven, clear eyes, flannel shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow, and thinking, he's probably married. That was the kind of man he seemed like. Settled. Warm. Kind. I said no to the granola bar. He smiled anyway. We crossed paths a few more times over the next couple of months. Volunteer events, neighborhood cleanups, fundraisers. He always said hi. Sometimes we made small talk. I kept my distance. It was easier to keep people at arm's length. But he never pushed. Never pried. Just noticed things. Like how I always carried tea bags in my purse because office coffee gave me headaches. Or how I flinched when someone mentioned relationships. One day, after I helped carry boxes to his car, he asked if I wanted to grab a sandwich. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to. Because I did. And that was terrifying. But something in his expression, hopeful, but not demanding, made me nod. Yes, I said. But only if you don't ask about my past. He grinned. Only if you don't ask about mine. We ate at a little deli on a corner I'd never noticed before. Talked about books. Favorite childhood cartoons. Traveling. He told me he'd never been in a plane until he was 28. I told him I hated the ocean but loved the sound of waves. Nothing about pain. Nothing about betrayal. Just light. I didn't fall in love with Alex all at once. It was slower than that. Like warm water creeping into frozen skin. A gradual thaw. A cautious warmth that scared me at first. Because once you've been shattered, love doesn't feel like joy. It feels like risk. But Alex never asked me to be whole. He just offered to sit beside me while I tried. I told him about Daniel 6 months in. We were sitting on my couch, watching a terrible action movie. The kind where everything explodes and nobody ever reloads a gun. He was laughing at something when I turned to him and said, "I need to tell you something." I expected his expression to change. To darken. To shift into caution or discomfort. It didn't. I told him everything. About the accusation. The betrayal. The divorce. The way it left me empty and raw. I told him how long it had taken to trust my own voice again. When I finished, he didn't ask if I'd done it. He just said, "I'm sorry that happened to you." That was it. Not "Why didn't you leave sooner?" Not "Are you still in love with him?" Not "What if he comes back?" Just sorrow. For me. That night, he held me like I was something fragile, but not broken. And for the first time in years, I believed that maybe I wasn't. 18 months later. We got married in a small ceremony on the edge of a hill, with only a few close friends and my therapist in the third row, smiling like she'd seen the blueprint for this day long before I did. It wasn't extravagant. I didn't wear white. But it was right. A year after that, Emma was born. Tiny. Loud. Perfect. Her cries felt like music. Her smile was a sunrise. I held her one night, rocking her in the nursery, and thought, this is what peace looks like. Not silence. Not safety. But wholeness. The kind you earn. The kind you build, piece by painful piece, with someone who sees every scar and calls it beautiful anyway. I thought the past was finally gone. I was wrong. Because 3 weeks after Emma turned 4, Daniel came back. It started with a message. No subject line. No warning. Just a single sentence, sitting quietly in my inbox like a landmine. I know the truth now. I made the biggest mistake of my life. My chest went cold. For a long time, I didn't move. I just stared at the screen, waiting for the words to disappear, as if maybe they'd vanish if I blinked hard enough. But they didn't. They stayed there. A wound reopened. I didn't respond. The next day, flowers arrived at my office. White lilies, my favorite. There was no name on the card. Just another note. I never stopped loving you. Please let me fix this. I threw them in the trash. That night, I told Alex. He listened without interruption, his face unreadable, but his hand was warm on mine. Steady. I'll handle it if you want, he said. Or you can. I already did, I said. 9 years ago. But Daniel wasn't done. A week later. He emailed again. A longer message this time. He said he found out the truth from Mark. That it was all a misunderstanding. That he'd spent years trying not to think about me, but couldn't let it go. He wrote about our marriage, about how he used to watch me sleep and wonder how he got so lucky. He wrote like we were still something. Like the divorce had been a pause, not an ending. I didn't respond. Then he left a voicemail. His voice was raw, unfamiliar in its vulnerability. I thought I could live without you. But I was wrong. I made a terrible mistake. Please, just talk to me. Once. That's all I'm asking. I deleted it. He came to my workplace 3 days later. I was stepping out for lunch when I saw him across the street, standing beneath a tree, dressed in black, holding a coffee like he belonged there. My legs went weak. He didn't speak at first. Just looked at me with the same desperate eyes I remembered from the night he handed me those papers. I didn't know, he said. That's right, I answered. Because you didn't want to know. I thought you betrayed me. You never even asked. He stepped closer. You're still angry. No, I said. I'm done. I walked away without letting him finish. That should have been the end. But it wasn't. 2 weeks later. He showed up outside my house. I was coming home from picking Emma up at preschool. She was half asleep in the back seat, her hair sticking to her cheek. I pulled into the driveway and there he was, standing on the sidewalk. I froze. He raised a hand like we were old friends meeting for coffee. Alex was out front before I even got out of the car. Calm. Collected. Standing between us like a wall. Daniel tried to talk to him, told him we were meant to be. That I was still in love with him. That Alex was living someone else's life. I watched it unfold from the porch, heart racing, hands shaking. Alex never raised his voice. Never touched him. Just said, leave. And don't come back. Daniel left. But not for long. The breaking point. He started sending things. Old photos. Love letters. Songs we used to dance to. Notes written in the margins of a worn copy of the first book he ever gave me. It was haunting. Obsessive. Deliberate. He even sent a letter addressed to Emma, telling her he was her real father in spirit, that we once had something beautiful, and one day she'd understand. That was when I snapped. I called him. For the first and only time. When he answered, there was a tremble in his voice. Like he thought maybe, just maybe, this was a beginning. You destroyed me, I said. And now that I've rebuilt, you want to take it all back? I made a mistake, he whispered. I was scared. I didn't know how to believe in anything back then. But I know now. And I'll wait forever if I have to. I stood in my living room, holding the phone like it burned. No, I said quietly. I don't love you anymore. I love the man who believed in me when you didn't. That's who I belong with now. And I hung up. The last thing he ever sent came a week later. No grand gesture. No flowers. Just one line. I'll never forgive myself. But I'll always love you. I didn't reply. I didn't cry. I just closed my eyes, walked into Emma's room, and kissed her forehead. Then I lay in bed beside my husband, the man who never once doubted me, and held his hand in the dark. Peace isn't a place you find. It's something you protect. For a long time after Daniel's last message, I kept waiting to feel something, guilt, maybe. Pity. Anger. Even nostalgia. But I didn't. What I felt was relief. Not because I won. Not because I said the right words. Because I was finally free from the invisible weight of needing to be understood by the man who refused to listen. I told Alex everything. Every word. Every letter. Every confrontation. He sat beside me while I read Daniel's final message out loud. He didn't ask me to block it out. Or pretend it didn't happen. He just kissed my forehead and said, "Thank you for telling me." There's a kind of love that shows up in silence, in the way someone holds space for your pain without needing to fix it. Alex did that. Every single time. 6 months later. We took Emma to the coast for the first time. She squealed when her toes hit the water. Ran up and down the beach collecting shells, her laughter skipping across the waves. Alex chased her, arms out like wings. I watched them from a blanket, heart swelling with something I hadn't felt in years. Not just love. Joy. Not the fragile kind that feels borrowed, but the kind you earn through fire and rain. The kind that comes from choosing it, again and again, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Emma came running up to me, cheeks pink with wind. "Mommy, look what I found." She held up a tiny, broken shell. I smiled. "It's beautiful. But it's cracked," she said. "Still beautiful," I said, brushing her hair back. "Sometimes the cracks are just part of the story." Alex looked over at me then. Not saying anything. Just seeing me, the way he always did. And I thought of Daniel, for the last time. Not with rage. Not even with sadness. Just acceptance. Because what we had wasn't built to last. It was built on fear, on perfection, on the belief that love is proven only in the absence of doubt. But real love? The kind that stays? It knows better. It forgives. It trusts. It waits to hear your truth. Now. Every night, I tuck Emma into bed. We read a story, sometimes two. I kiss her forehead, brush her hair back, whisper that I love her, until she drifts into sleep with one hand still curled around mine. Then I climb into bed beside Alex. We don't always say much. We don't have to. Because everything that matters is already here, in the way he reaches for my hand in the dark, in the breath we share, in the life we built from broken pieces and stubborn hope. Daniel may live with regret forever. But I live with peace. Because love isn't just about the past. It's about who stays with you when the world turns against you. And I chose right.